Hello and welcome back to Vintage Disney here on Brian's Things That Are Cool. As we continue our tribute to the American adventure, today we have 1957's Johnny Tremain. Johnny Tremain was directed by Robert Stevenson, here at the helm of his first of 19 Disney films. It was filmed as part of a two-part program for the Disneyland TV show, but was released in theaters first on June 19, 1957. The film would later be cut into two parts and shown as part of Walt Disney's Disneyland TV show in November of 1958. And the two portions were even released individually in 1968 for educational purposes. The Boston Tea Party and The Shot Heard Round the World. Original songs for the film were written by George Bruns and Tom Blackburn, who, among other Disney gems, wrote the massively successful Ballad of Davy Crockett. Their song for Johnny Tremain, Liberty Tree, was later released on a 45 EP of other patriotic Disney songs that I have, and is one of my favorite moments in the film. Two Disney shorts, a nature short called The Wetback Hound, and the cartoon The Story of Anyburg, USA, sort of a comical driver safety PSA, were shown with the film. Johnny Tremain had a solid cast, many of whom were no strangers to Disney, like Jeff York, Luana Patton, Sebastian Cabot, and even our hero, Hal STALMASTER, who oddly didn't have much of a career after Johnny Tremain, but did appear as Gwyn in The Swamp Fox. Though the film was unsuccessful in England,
gasp! I never would have guessed.
It did well here in the States. So much so, Walt planned to build Liberty Street in Disneyland as an annex to Main Street, USA. Though this never came into fruition, after Walt's death the concept was revived and turned into the much more expansive Liberty Square in Walt Disney World. And they have a great little restaurant there. The centerpiece of Liberty Square being the Liberty Tree, which was a live oak tree found growing on Disney property and transplanted from 6 miles away by Disney engineers. It's really quite impressive with its 13 lanterns representing the original 13 American colonies. What better American adventure story is there than the story of our founding? Based on Esther Forbes' novel of the same name, Johnny Tremain follows the story of a boy who gets caught up in the Revolutionary War. Too many times, history teachers present historical figures as mythical beings that are next to impossible to relate to. While the film takes dramatic liberty with facts, it does make these characters real and three-dimensional. It proves, like all Disney Americana productions, to be an ideal place to start when learning American history. Our movie opens in Boston in 1773, where we meet Johnny. Johnny wants to be a silversmith and is apprenticed to one of the best silversmiths in Boston. Silversmiths were highly respected in the 18th century. Johnny, Hal STALMASTER, in his screen debut, doesn't have much luck. An aristocrat brings a teapot to be repaired, and the smith tells him he can't fix it. Johnny decides to fix it, disobeying orders by working on the Sabbath. He tries to cover up his work as a watchman approaches and burns his hand in molten silver. His hand is left curled and useless, and he is now unable to find a job. Not much work for a guy with a shriveled, gnarled up hand, even today. Until now, Johnny has been apathetic to the cause of the revolution, but finds work at their headquarters, the only place that will hire him. After he is wrongfully accused of theft by a nobleman, Johnny joins the Sons of Liberty. The Sons of Liberty was a group of American patriots that originated in the pre-independence North American British colonies. The group was started by Samuel Adams, cousin of second President John Adams. The group was formed to protect the rights of the colonists and to take to the streets against taxes by the British government. John Adams said of Sam, "When his deeper feelings were excited, he erected himself, or rather nature seemed to erect him, without the smallest symptoms of affection, into an upright dignity of figure and gesture, and gave a harmony to his voice, which made a strong impression, the more lasting for the purity, correctness, and nervous elegance of his style." With the Sons of Liberty, Johnny takes part in the Boston Tea Party. The Boston Tea Party, which at the time was called the Destruction of the Tea, was a political protest by the Sons of Liberty against the tax policy of British government and the East India Company that controlled all the tea imported to the colonies. Chancellor Frederick Lord North came up with a scheme to bail out East India Company in May of 1773. Corrupt politicians bailing out failing companies at the expense of the American taxpayer. Glad that doesn't happen today. In its British warehouses, the company had 17 million pounds of unsold tea. Under the Tea Act of 1773, the government would be able to refund the British duty of 12 pence per pound on all tea shipped to the colonies, and collect only the existing 3 pence duty paid at the colonial port. It was supposed to mean that the colonists could get the tea much cheaper than the English could. Unfortunately, Chancellor North didn't take into account that price alone wouldn't control the colonial reaction. The committees of correspondence told the colonists about the British trying to buy their loyalty with cheap tea.
On December 16, 1773,
a group of colonists disguised as Mohawk Indians boarded 3 ships hauling tea and destroyed the tea by throwing 342 chests of tea into Boston Harbor, after officials in Boston refused to return the taxed tea to Britain. The Tea Party was the result of a resistance movement throughout America against the Tea Act, which had been passed by the British Parliament in 1773. Colonists objected to the Tea Act because they felt that it violated their right to no taxation without representation. Protesters have been successful in preventing the unloading of taxed tea into 3 other colonies. But in Boston, Governor Thomas Hutchinson refused to allow the tea to be returned to Britain. The Boston Tea Party had a major impact on the growing American Revolution. Parliament responded in 1774 with the Intolerable Acts, which ended local self-government in Massachusetts and closed Boston's commerce. Colonists throughout the 13 colonies in turn responded to the Intolerable Acts with more protests and formed the First Continental Congress, which pensioned the British monarch for repeal of the acts. After Johnny and the colonists destroy the tea, they march into the middle of town, lighting the Liberty Tree with their torches as they sing George Brunn's The Liberty Tree. The Liberty Tree was an elm tree that stood in Boston near Boston Common. The British would mock the Liberty Tree whenever they got the chance. British soldiers once tarred and feathered a man named Thomas Ditson and forced him to march in front of the tree. During the siege of Boston, a party of loyalists, or Tories, led by Job Williams, cut the tree down in an act of spite and used the tree for firewood. This act only added more fuel to the fire. As resistance to the British grew, flags with the Liberty Tree were flown to symbolize the unwavering spirit of liberty. The second half of the film opens with General Gage, in charge of the colonies, calling in the leader of the Patriots to tell him he can no longer ignore what's happening all around him. He wants to end the training of militia and the storing of weapons, among other things. He promises the man that if he calls it off, they will be treated fairly by the British. Gage was not a popular man. After being accepted by the colonists at first, he soon began to implement the various acts, including the Boston Port Act, which put many people out of work. He also attempted to buy off political leaders in Massachusetts, notably Benjamin Church and Samuel Adams. With the former, he was successful. Church secretly supplied him with intelligence on the activities of rebel leaders, but Adams and other rebel leaders refused his requests. Johnny and the Sons of Liberty now hold a final meeting where James Otis, played by Jeff York, delivers a beautiful speech on war, telling the men that they must know what they're fighting for. Otis was a manic depressive, or schizophrenic, depending on who you ask, but like his friend Sam Adams, was often there to call people to arms. One of General Gage's officers tells the general that it's possible to overpower the colonists without bloodshed. He is given permission to do so, and the British and the colonists meet at Lexington Green. The battles of Lexington and Concord were the first battles of the American Revolutionary War. This film accurately portrays these battles. The battles were fought on April 19, 1775 in Middlesex County, province of Massachusetts Bay, within the towns of Lexington, Concord, Lincoln, Menotomy, which today is called Arlington, and Cambridge near Boston. About 700 British Army regulars under Lieutenant Colonel Francis Smith were given secret orders to capture and destroy military supplies that were being stored by the Massachusetts militia at Concord. The colonists had received word weeks before that their supplies might be at risk, and had already moved most of them to other locations. The first shots were fired at sunrise in Lexington. The British advance guard saw Captain John Parker and about 70 Minutemen. Parker only wanted a silent protest, but Major Pitcairn rode in, swung his sword, and yelled, "Disperse, you damn rebels! Run, you dogs, run!" The Americans had already started to leave when someone fired a pistol. The British then charged the Minutemen with bayonets and killed 8 men. The British then moved on to Concord, where they looked for the supplies. At the North Bridge in Concord, approximately 500 militiamen fought and defeated 3 companies of the King's troops. The outnumbered regulars fell back from the Minutemen after a pitched battle in open territory. By noon, the British began marching back to Boston. Unfortunately for them, the road back turned into the road of death for the British. The rebels from every village and farm sat hidden in the bushes, trees, and behind stone walls, and shot at redcoats all the way back to the Charleston Peninsula. By night, the British had lost over 250 men. The Patriots had lost less than 100. A British general later reported to London that the rebels had earned his respect. Whoever looks upon them as an irregular mob will find themselves much mistaken. The American Revolution had begun. Johnny Tremain takes a fictional character and places him in a very real situation. Johnny is an innocent character, and we see the forming of our country through his eyes. That's not to say that the film oversimplifies any of the events of the American Revolution. The British are not shown as just cardboard villains, but real people who don't quite understand the colonists' desires. The Sons of Liberty are even shown at times to be very uncertain about which action they should take. Most realistically of all, it shows Johnny is apathetic to the cause as the film opens. History paints so many of these people as the ultimate patriots, but I feel it's important to show someone who doesn't want to get involved unless they have to. He is a character that sees wrong and will ultimately fight for what is right. That, to me, is the essence of the American Revolution. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed my look at Johnny Tremain. If you want to be kept up to date as to when I release a new video, go ahead, hit that subscribe button. And if you really want to be notified, hit that bell as well. I'm Brian, and I'll see you next time.
And we are the sons, yes, we are the sons of liberty.